The Naked DJs podcast, are they really naked? We know they expose themselves every day just so they can bring you the best of music. They like to stick it out there for everyone to hear. You can hear their podcast on Anchor.fm, YouTube, and any of your favorite podcast platforms. Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am joined by author, podcaster, Army veteran, and Army veteran advocate, Scott Deluzio. Scott served 6 years with the Army National Guard. He went to Afghanistan in 2010, and so did his brother Stephen. But his brother Stephen was killed in action, and when Scott came back from combat, he had trouble coping with the loss of his brother, as well as having went to combat, and he noticed other veterans were struggling the same way. So now we're going to be talking to Scott about his story and everything that he's doing to help other people cope and get through the struggles that they have as a veteran. So Scott, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate this opportunity to come and share my story with you and your audience.
Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah. So like you said, I am an Army veteran. I served about 6 years in the Connecticut Army National Guard, deployed to Afghanistan in 2010. When I joined the military, it wasn't something that I had necessarily planned on doing. It wasn't one of those things where I grew up thinking that I'd be in the military when I got older. But I was raised in a very patriotic family. There's videos of my brother and I when we were really young, holding American flags, singing the national anthem, things like that, before we were even like old enough to actually get the right words out. You know, it was one of those kind of cute kind of videos kind of things. But you know, so we grew up very patriotic. We grew up respecting the military and first responders and everything like that. And when 9/11 happened, I was in college at the time, and I had considered just dropping out of college at that point and just joining the military to go be a part of whatever the response was going to be. But I knew. After I slept on, I knew myself, and I knew that I wouldn't go back to college if I was to drop out. And I was already a couple years in at that point, and I figured I might as well just stay and finish what I started. If there was going to be any sort of military response, it would still be there when I finished college, and I would think about it then. So fast forward a little bit, my younger brother, Stephen, who you mentioned earlier, he ended up going up to school in Vermont, and he ended up joining the Vermont Army National Guard. And this was before I joined. And so I looked at him, and you know, all of a sudden he went from being my younger brother to this military guy that I grew up looking up to, these people. And I respected the hell out of his decision for joining the military, especially during a time of war. And I was really proud of him for that. And then about a year after that, I started hearing these reports in the news that the military was struggling to meet their recruiting numbers. And so that started getting under my skin, and it really got me angry. And I was thinking, like, the 9/11 was only just a few years ago, and all these people back then were anxious to go and get some payback for what had taken place. And where are all these people now? And then I had a good hard look at myself, and I said, well, you know what? I am one of those people, and I still haven't done anything either. So I said, you know what? All I have are excuses. There's no reason why I shouldn't join the military. And so I did. I signed up. I went down to the recruiter's office, probably gave them the easiest sell on getting someone in the military that they've ever had, because I just walked in and said, "Where do I sign?" And it wasn't quite that easy. There's some tests and paperwork and stuff that you have to go through, but it was probably one of the easiest sells that they had ever had. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and my background. And then, like you said, in 2010, my brother and I were deployed to Afghanistan, where he was tragically killed during a firefight. But I'm sure we can get more into that in a little bit. But
Yeah,
that's
tell us about the
my
day
background.
that you tell us about the day that you lost your brother. Describe as much as you can or as much as you would like
Sure.
to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to describe the whole thing. So I'll start off with kind of what happened to him. So his unit was on a mission to go into this village where there was some suspected Taliban activity, where they were going to go in and try to clear the village and try to detain whoever they could, capture any kind of weapons and things like that if they could. And so they went into this village, and as they were approaching it, they got caught up in an ambush, and they started taking fire from this position. And so, like any good trained soldier would do, they all kind of went for cover and returned fire. And in that initial attack, during that ambush, my brother was hit and he was killed pretty much instantly. Where he was hit, there was really no saving him at that point. And so, but they tried to. They called for the medics. They called, people came over trying to help him and everything, but he was gone. It was too late for him. And so that firefight, or actually, sorry, that mission that they were on went from a search mission where they're going in and looking for this enemy activity, to now a recovery mission. They now had to retrieve him out of the battlefield and get him out of there. And so it was a much harder mission at that point, because now not only did they not have my brother's gun to be firing back, because he wasn't physically able to shoot back after being killed, obviously, but there were four people who were carrying him out on a stretcher, and so in total there were five people out of the maybe 30 to 40 people who were on that mission who were no longer shooting back. And to make matters worse, during that evacuation process, another soldier was hit and killed as well. And so now, in total, they had 10 soldiers who were kind of out of commission, not able to return fire. So, it got to be a very difficult situation for them. What they ended up having to do was they were on the kind of side of a mountain, and they had to slide down this mountain to get down into this village. And they took over one of the buildings there that was kind of built into the bottom of the mountain, and used that as their casualty collection point, where they brought the two soldiers who were killed, and use that sort of as a little bit of cover to provide them with some protection from the incoming enemy fire. And that firefight took place over several hours, which anyone who has been in a firefight could tell you that 5 minutes in a firefight could seem like an eternity. And so, they were pushed to their limits during that. Not only did they lose two of their friends, but they also, had to literally fight for their own lives. And so that was a very traumatic day for them. The same day, I was out on a mission as well. We flew into this village the night before, and we were basically sitting on top of this mountain, waiting for the first light, the daybreak, to come through for us to go down into this village. And we were on the same type of mission, where we were looking for Taliban activity. We had reports that they had stolen some Afghan army uniforms, and so we were going to go look for that in this village. We had reports that they had weapons and like RPGs and things along those lines, other explosives. So that our job was to go and look through this village to find that type of stuff. So as we were going through this village, we sort of got to the end of the village. We found a few things. No people that were like fighting us, but we found some uniforms that we burned and destroyed, and we found some weapons that we destroyed on the spot. And then I got a call on the radio from my commanding officer, and he was looking specifically for me. And so I was an enlisted guy. I was a sergeant, and the way the chain of command works is usually the commanding officer would go through the chain of command and work a message down through the chain of command, as opposed to just jumping over it and going straight to the person that he's looking for. And so that set off some red flags in my head. And over the radio, he didn't say what he wanted. He didn't say if it was a good thing or a bad thing or whatever. And so I was racking my brain trying to figure out what had gone on. What did I screw something up? Did one of my soldiers screw something up? What was going on? And so eventually I linked up with him, and he tells me that my brother's unit was ambushed and that my brother had gotten hit. And up until that point, I didn't allow myself to even consider the possibility that my brother wouldn't be making it home at some point, or even that he would be seriously wounded. So when he told me that, I just thought, okay, well, he's probably just hurt. Okay, so what are the logistics looking like here? How do I get to him? How do I go there to be moral support? Or if he needs blood or a kidney or something like that, how do I get to him so I can go and be with him? This is me kicking back into Big Brother mode, trying to help him and protect him in whatever way that I could. And then the commanding officer looked at me and he goes, "No, I don't think you understand. He was killed." And my whole world just came crashing down in that moment. It was like I got hit by a freight train. It was something that I just, prior to that moment, it didn't even dawn on me that he could be killed. He had previously done a tour to Iraq in Ramadi, which was at the time a very dangerous situation that he was in, and he survived that. And so to me, I was like, well, he could survive anything. If he could survive that, he could survive anything. And why would I be worried that he wasn't going to make it home? And yeah, so I just broke down. I was a mess. I had a couple soldiers come in and sit with me to make sure I was okay. I'm still holding a loaded rifle, and they're probably worried that I could do something stupid either to myself or to somebody else. So they wanted to just make sure that I wasn't going to go off the rails there and do something bad. But within maybe 20 minutes of finding out of my brother's death, our own unit started taking fire from the village that we just came out of. Obviously, there were some weapons and stuff that didn't get discovered. This mission that we were on was a joint mission with the Afghan army. They were taking the lead in terms of searching the houses. We were just there kind of as backup and support if they needed help. And so they obviously did not find all the weapons that were in the village. And so, we started taking fire from this village. We had RPGs coming towards us. We had AK-47 fire coming towards us. And here I am, a sobbing mess. And I have to put all of my personal issues aside and pick myself back up and go back to work and do my job. I had about 9 or 10 soldiers who were under my command, and they needed me there to help get them in the right position to make sure we didn't have any friendly fire incidents. They needed me there to make sure that they had enough ammo to fight back, to do all the things that an infantry leader should be doing. And so in that moment, I was just enraged at the situation, and I had this fleeting thought that I just wanted to go back down into this village and kill everybody that I saw down there. I just wanted to get revenge and pay back for that. But I knew if I did that, I wasn't going to make it out alive. There's no way one any one guy is going to go down there and take on a whole village full of people who are shooting at you. And I was married. I had a newborn son at home, and my parents had just lost one of their sons, and I couldn't do that to any of them. I couldn't go and do something so selfish and so stupid and make them lose a second loved one that day. And I also realized that if I went down there, my soldiers would probably follow me down there too, back into this village, and that would put them at risk, and that would put them unnecessarily at risk. And even if by some stroke of luck I made it out of there, chances are one of them wouldn't. And how would I look their family in the eye, their wives or their parents or their children or whatever, and say, yeah, they're not here because I couldn't keep my head on straight. And so I decided, and this whole thing that I was just describing, this all took place in my head in a matter of probably 10 or 15 seconds. It was just like a rapid fire thoughts going through my brain. And so I decided in that moment that I needed to just put my personal issues aside and get back to work and go lead them and do what I needed to do. And so that's what I did. And we were fortunate enough that our unit did not take any casualties during that firefight. We had a few injuries, but nothing major, nothing serious. And after that firefight, our commanding officer called in a helicopter to evacuate me and a couple of the other wounded people. But he knew that I was in no condition to sit around there and continue fighting. So that basically started my journey home. I flew from that remote village out to Bagram Air Base, where it's basically the main air base in Afghanistan. And that was the start of my journey home. The next morning, there was a ceremony. They call it a ramp ceremony, and that's where they bring the fallen soldiers onto the plane that's going to bring them out of the country, to start them back home. And so I was fortunate enough that I was able to be there for the ceremony that they had for my brother and this other soldier who was killed. And the reason why I say I was fortunate is because typically there's no family representation at these types of things, and people from all over the world. There were soldiers, foreign soldiers, Polish soldiers, German soldiers, I think even Australian soldiers came to this to come and pay their respects. There were high-ranking military officials, and to me it felt great to be. It didn't feel great, but it felt important that my brother had someone from the family there to greet these people and thank them for coming, because it did mean a lot knowing that people from all over the world took time out of their day to come there and pay their respects, and that was a special thing for me. But I managed to get a seat on that flight that he left Afghanistan on, and so we went to Kuwait from there, and that's where I had to leave him there. And then we parted ways, and I continued on my way home, and that was basically but from the day that he was killed to the day that I got home, it was about maybe 2.5 days in total. So it was a very quick transition from being on a battlefield, getting shot at, to sitting in my living room and being around other family and stuff. So it was difficult because I didn't really have any kind of time to decompress and process what had just taken place. The firefight that we were in, the loss of my brother, it was all real, like I just said, like rapid fire stuff that was coming at me, and it was almost like drinking from a fire hose, where you just get so much and you can't process all of it at once. So it was a tough time for me during that time period.
Well, let's talk about after you came back and some of the things you experienced and how you cope with it and what made you decide to become a Army veteran advocate.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first came home, I knew I wasn't quite right. I wasn't the same person that I was when I left. But I figured, you know what, I'll be okay. I'll be able to figure this out. This will just take time. I'm grieving the loss of my brother. I had just gotten plucked off the battlefield and sent on a plane home. This is just going to take some time to process, but I'll be okay. But I wasn't. I couldn't sleep at night, no matter what I did. Like sleeping pills and things like that just weren't working for me. And the only thing I could do to get myself to get any sort of sleep was I would just drink until I passed out. And that's not the healthiest way to go about doing things, but that's what I ended up doing. And like anyone else who drinks too much, you wake up with a hangover and you're out of it and you're groggy and everything. And so I'm sure I was a delight to be around, with my family and coworkers and friends and stuff. I probably was not the nicest person to be around, but what I would try to do to get myself to shake out the cobwebs and get on with the day is just I would start drinking coffee and energy drinks and things like that to get myself back up and moving. And that worked okay for a little while, but then it was later and later in the day that I needed to continue drinking the caffeine to keep myself going. And it got to the point where I was drinking so late in the day that it was affecting my sleep all over again. And then even no matter how much I was drinking, it was hard for me to fall back to sleep. And so it was just a vicious cycle where I just couldn't get myself to regulate. And I kept trying to, I guess in this case, like self-medicate, where I was trying to force myself to sleep and then force myself to stay awake and everything. And it just going back and forth. And I would get angry and at the smallest things. I mentioned before I had a newborn at home, and at this point he was, maybe a year old or so, and he would do something like any other 1-year-old would do, like spill food off of the table or whatever, and I would just flip out. I'd be yelling. I'd be so angry. Little things like that would just send me in a off the edge, and I just couldn't keep it together. And it got to the point where I recognized that I wasn't quite myself, but I still was lying to myself, saying, "No, I'll be okay. I'll be okay." And then one day my wife came to me and she said, "I thought you'd be able to kind of handle this, but it seems like you might need to get some help." And I already knew this, but I don't think I was. I don't know if I was strong enough to admit it at that point. And she helped nudge me in that right direction to have me go and get help. And so I called for an appointment with the vet center, which is kind of affiliated with the VA somehow, but they offer mental health counseling and things like that. So I called them and made an appointment. Now, I really didn't know what to expect from this appointment. It could have been any number of things that were that I'd have to deal with, but I just said, what, it doesn't matter what I'm going to get out of this. I know I need the help. So I called, made the appointment, and after hanging up the phone, I felt like this little bit of a relief because I realized that I'm no longer having to deal with this burden all on my own. I'm going to have somebody else there who's going to help me with this, who's going to help not necessarily carry the burden for me, but they're going to help show me how to carry it and deal with it in a healthy and more appropriate way. So I went there for almost 2 years, consistently, week after week, just going in, and it did help. It got my anger issues sort of under control. Helped. I was sleeping a little bit better at night. I wasn't drinking as much as I was before, and I felt like I was getting things under control. So at that point, I said, okay, you know what? I think I'm good. I don't need to keep going anymore. I'll free up this appointment spot for somebody else who might need it, and I'm good to go. And a couple of years later, I started noticing that I was slipping back into some of these old habits again, and I was drinking more and more. I was sleeping less and less. I was getting angry and frustrated all over again, and I realized that I hadn't really gotten over whatever it was that I needed to get over. Not that you necessarily get over the loss of a loved one, but I didn't maybe the things that I had learned in these sessions, maybe I slipped on them, and I wasn't putting them to practice in my day-to-day life. And I wasn't as good as I thought I was. So I went back and I continued going to counseling. That made me realize is that mental health is a lot like any other physical health condition, where on an annual basis you might go to your doctor for a checkup just to make sure everything's going well. You get your blood tests, make sure your cholesterol is in line, and all these other things that the doctors do during these annual checkups. And it's kind of like that with your mental health as well, where you might need to just go get a checkup every once in a while. Make sure things are good. Make sure you're not going off in the wrong direction. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so that's sort of what I started to realize with my own mental health, was that I needed more help than what I initially thought I needed. Initially, I didn't think I needed any, but then once when I started going to this treatment, I realized that I did need some help, but I didn't know how much. And so I continued going. And as a matter of fact, I still continue going, and I still talk to counselors every so often. And it helps to just keep myself in check and make sure that I'm not going to slip off that edge again. But when we got back from Afghanistan, my company was very fortunate in that we did not lose any soldiers to combat. Nobody was killed in action from my company, and that's out of about 150 some odd soldiers, and that's pretty good, especially in 2010. That was a very difficult year in Afghanistan. But what started happening after we got home is we started losing some of these soldiers to suicide, and I mean, one is too many, but then when the second one, you find out about that second one, and then another one, and another, you keep hearing people that you've served with, whether it was overseas or not, you just keep hearing people that you've served with who've taken their own lives. And I just was not okay with that. I knew something had to be done. I couldn't just sit around waiting for the next phone call saying that another friend had taken their lives. So I decided I wanted to do something that could reach more than just my little circle of Army buddies and stuff like that, because that's real easy. We're all friends on Facebook. We chat with each other semi regularly, and we can keep up with each other there. That was easy. I could always do that, but I wanted to help out more than just that, because I started to realize that there was a growing issue in the military and the veteran communities where this number gets thrown around where 22 veterans kill themselves every single day. And that's just a huge number. If you think about 22 people, like that's just a crazy high number. And I knew that at some point, one of those 22 could be somebody else that I knew and that I cared about. And I wanted to do whatever I could to lower that number as much as possible. And I'm not, nuts. I know I'm just one man, and I probably can't bring that number down to zero on my own, but if I can bring it down just a little bit, then so be it. I'm glad to do whatever I can. So I wanted to reach as many people as possible. And so I started my podcast, the Drive On podcast. And on the show, we talk about things that other veterans have overcome, any of their struggles, whether it's substance abuse, homelessness, PTSD, depression, job-related issues when they transition out of the military, education type issues, that just general life issues that they might be dealing with. And we talk about the success stories of how they've overcome some of these issues and how they've gotten better over time. Some of them are still a work in progress, but they've tried things, and they've been very resilient in that they weren't letting this get them down, and that they weren't going to just lay down and just accept that this is the way their life is going to be. And so we talk about those to share those stories with other veterans who might feel like they're all alone in this struggle that they're going through. And so when they hear these stories from other veterans, they're like, you know what, okay, this guy or this gal, they got through something very similar to what I'm going through. So let me listen to what they've done. And what I found is that starts to give hope to some of these people, and it gives them an opportunity to say, you know what, maybe I haven't tried every possible solution that's out there. Maybe I just went to the VA and I had a bad therapist when I went there, and it didn't work out for me. But maybe I could try with somebody else, or try some other form of therapy, or something that they might need, and not quit, just not to quit on themselves. And then on the other side of the podcast, we also talk to providers of services to veterans, where they're nonprofits. There's other organizations that are out there who are providing services, things like equestrian, like horse therapy, where veterans will go and they'll work with horses, they'll ride the horses, they'll do things with horses, and that helps them in their PTSD treatment. Other things like art therapy or music or different things like that. Just trying to get all the options out there, because maybe I might mention something about art therapy, painting or sculpting or something like that, and maybe that doesn't resonate with this particular listener, because okay, well, they're not very artistic and they've never been artistic and they're not really interested in it. Okay, cool. No problem. But there's something else. Maybe they love animals. So maybe horses would be a better option for them. And so we go and we talk to all these different providers, trying to just put out all the information that they could possibly need to find the services that will help them in their own recovery. And again, really all this is trying to do is give hope to those people who are out there who may feel like they're struggling alone. They may feel like all hope is lost for them, and they may be ready to throw in the towel. And we don't want that for them. We want to give them a life of purpose and meaning, and give them something to look forward to. And that's exactly what we try to do with this podcast, and help out with that. I've also written a book called Surviving Son, which is a story. It's a story of my time in the Army, and but it's also my brother's story as well. And so in that book, I talk about a lot of the things that I talked about already, and go into more detail in that stuff as well. But really, what I want people to take away from that book is, on the veteran and the military side, I want them to learn from my mistakes and learn that there are healthy ways to deal with PTSD, grief, stresses of combat and deployments and everything like that. There's healthier ways to do it. You don't need to drink yourself to sleep like I did. You don't need to try to skate out of going to these mental health services that are being offered. Some people are like myself. We go into these meetings. When I got home, there were these mandatory mental health screenings, and I just lied through my teeth and I said everything was fine. Everything wasn't fine. It wasn't even close to fine. But there was a stigma around mental health, and I didn't want to be caught up in that. And I didn't want to spend any more time away from my family. I didn't want them to, send me to a facility where I'd have to stay overnight or whatever. I didn't want any of that. So I just said, you know what, everything's fine. I'll just deal with it on my own. But here's the thing. If it's not fine, it's not going to just magically get better on its own. You're going to need to do something to get help. And so I want the veterans and the service members out there to learn that it's okay to ask for help. Then on the other side, I also hope that civilians, the people who maybe have never served in the military or never knew anyone who served, I hope they can learn about the sacrifices that we make in the military and in the military community, the families, the communities that we lived in, and that these people who you hear about on the news, they're more than just a face on the news. They had real lives. They had people who cared for them. They are, and they're out there sacrificing themselves for other people. And ultimately, I want people to feel like they sort of knew my brother after reading this book, knew a little bit about him, and could take away, a little bit of that feeling that somebody who knew him would have had when they found out that he passed away. Because not that I'm some anti-war person, or anything like that, but I want to make sure that the next wars that our country gets into in the future are wars that are worth the sacrifice that our young men and women are inevitably going to make, because I don't want us just running into the next war because maybe it's a popular thing to do. I want people to really think hard about what the objectives are, and is it worth sending these young kids into battle? And if the answer is no, then maybe we should rethink what our strategy is. And so that's kind of what I'm hoping people get out of that book. But ultimately, the goal is helping out veterans, giving them hope, giving them options, and hoping that they can come out on the other side of their traumas with a sense of purpose and meaning in their lives.
Speaking of the news, in the last year, the troops have been withdrawn from Afghanistan. So tell us how you feel about that and how everything went down, the loss of the 13 soldiers, and how everything was handled. Even talk about that Marine that got in trouble for speaking his opinion about it.
Yeah, well, initially when I first heard that, we're pulling out of Afghanistan, and this was earlier in the year, I knew there was some arbitrary deadline that, it got set somehow. I don't know exactly who came up with the date or whatever, but and I said, okay, well, good. We have a deadline. We know the time that we're gonna be pulling out. We'll have plenty of time to prepare for this, and we'll be able to get all of our equipment, all of our troops. We'll be able to get our allies and stuff out of the country before this time period. Then, as the date grew closer, there started to be this chatter of, we still have all this equipment. We have helicopters and trucks and weapons and everything like that, just sitting there on military bases, and we didn't think to bring any of that stuff home. And then we also had a bunch of our allies, Afghan interpreters. We had other people like that who were still in Afghanistan. Even some Americans who were still in Afghanistan. There wasn't really a plan to get them out, and all of that just got me so angry. And I started, like a lot of other veterans, especially those who served over there, I started thinking to myself, was this even worth it? Was this war worth the fight? And I started getting kind of depressed about it, especially thinking about my brother and all the thousands of other soldiers who and Marines and sailors and airmen and everything that were killed over there. It just really started weighing on me. But then I said, okay, there's nothing I can do to change the past. Those lives are lost. They're gone. What can I do? And what can I do that's going to have a positive impact on the outcome of this? And so I started thinking about the positives of what we were actually doing over there. And that war in Afghanistan was started right after 9/11. It was in response to the 9/11 attacks. And I took a look back and I said, okay, since 9/11, there hasn't been a single plane that came crashing down into an American city. None of our buildings collapsed because of terrorist attacks. We didn't have, planes dropping out of the sky or anything. So I think we accomplished that mission by protecting Americans here at home. Yeah, we went over there and we lost some good people over there, but we all knew what we were signing up for. We knew that we were going to possibly go to war, especially if you signed up during that time period, during that war. And we knew that our job was to protect Americans, and we did that. And so I don't feel like the lives that were lost, including my brother's, I don't feel like they were lost for nothing. There was a lot of good that was done by keeping the fight over there and not letting the fight come back over here. So as far as I'm concerned, we saved a countless number of American lives, but we also saved a lot of Afghan lives over there too. We provided protection for them so that we kept the Taliban out of certain areas, and people who lived in those areas were able to live a relatively free life in terms of what they had previously known as freedom. It was much more free at that point. And so I feel like we possibly even planted that seed of freedom in some of their minds, especially some of the young people, the young girls especially, who had the opportunity to go to school for the first time ever. And some of those young girls are now adults and possibly have children of their own, and what I ever had. And I know that they are probably very similar in that they want better for their kids than what they had. And if they had schooling and education growing up, they probably want that for their kids too. And if they can't have that, then I'm hoping that they'd be willing to fight for it. And fight for some of the other things that we provided for them, different infrastructure that they never had, some bridges and roads and water going into villages that never had that stuff before. I hope that they'll continue to fight for this. Maybe that's just me being overly optimistic, but I'm hopeful that that they will appreciate what we had given them for those 20 years, and that they will continue to fight for it. And there's some people who still can't wrap their head around, okay, we were at war for 20 years, and at the end of the day, it went back to the way that it was in the beginning of this war, where the Taliban's in power and they're in control of the country, and they're not letting them live, the Afghans live the way that they necessarily want to. And so I talked about this in my book. I gave this example where my grandmother, she was diagnosed with cancer in 1968. And she went through all the chemo and all the other treatments and stuff that they went through, and it was hell. It was terrible. She was sick and everything, but she beat it, and she ended up going into remission. She got better, and she ended up living for about 21 years after that. She died in 1989, but she lived long enough that she was able to see most of her grandchildren be born. I think all but one. She lived long enough to see her children grow up and get married. She got a lot of life out of that. Ultimately, it was the same outcome had the doctors just done nothing back in 1968. She would have died from cancer back then, and ultimately she had the same outcome. But I can't really say that their efforts back then were a wasted effort, because she got to have 20 years of life. And so I make that a equation to the Afghan people, where the Taliban is the cancer, the coalition forces were the doctors, and the people of Afghanistan were the patient. And we provided them with life for 20 years. We provided them with a little bit of freedom and a better way of life during those 20 years. And I hope that they see it that way too. And yeah, ultimately it went back, and the cancer came back, the Taliban came back, but really at the end of the day, they were able to experience a little bit of freedom. And I think being able to experience freedom, no matter how brief and how short it is better than never experiencing it at all. And so, I'm hopeful that the people of Afghanistan see it that way as well.
Well, go ahead and throw out your contact information, tell people where they can purchase your books and connect with you on social media and keep up with everything that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So my book is available on Amazon. You can get it there. Again, the name of the book is Surviving Son. The podcast is Drive On Podcast. You can go to driveonpodcast.com and find out where to subscribe to that. Anywhere that you listen to podcasts, but all the links are there on the website. And on social media, it's all the social medias are at Drive On Podcast as well. So, if you're on Instagram or Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, you can find the podcast there as well.
Close us out with some final thoughts and this question here. What would you say to a veteran that feels like all hope is lost? Close us out with that.
If you feel like all hope is lost, I guarantee you that you haven't tried everything. And there's something else out there. There's some way that you can fight through whatever it is that you're going through. And what I've told people before is that at this point, you have already survived 100% of all of your bad days. You've gotten through all of them so far, and you can make it tomorrow, and you can make it the next day, and you can make it next week and next month and next year, and you can keep going. And life will get better if you let it get better. If you try the things that have been proven to work, if you just have that resilient attitude where you don't give up and you keep trying, life will get better. It may not seem like it can get better right in the moment, but it will. And you just have to keep fighting for it, and you have to want it. So keep fighting. Don't give up. You've already survived all of your worst days. Keep going.
Ladies and gentlemen, be sure to check out Scott's podcast and all that he's doing to advocate for the veterans. Check out his book. Also, be sure to share this episode to as many people as possible. If you know of any veterans that need to hear this message, share it to them. Follow, rate, review, and Android listeners, go to the Google Play Store and download the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast app. Scott, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.